Hey guys, this is the Galaxy S23 Ultra, which you already know looks like the S22 Ultra from last year, and yada yada yada. Everyone has already talked about the design and all the specs and whatnot, so I want to take a different approach and talk about the 5 main things that I have noticed about this phone in the last 2 weeks. Now the first and the most important thing is the battery life. Now in the past year, I have used the Pixel 7 Pro, the iPhone 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max, the Z Fold 4, just to name a few, and I can confidently say that the battery life on the S23 Ultra is better than all these phones, and this has impressed me with each day. Now most Android phones have decent to okay battery life, but this is very different. Now I have averaged 7 hours of screen on time on some days, and it goes as far or as high as 9 hours depending on the work I have to do that day. Now for context, I have my brightness on 100% all the time. I use Google Maps while listening to music, and I also had a few video calls, and I'm not the biggest gamer, but sometimes I play Subway Surfer or just Apex Legends to pass the time. Now, I have put this thing through its paces, and it has really impressed me with its optimization. Now if you had any doubts about the battery life, then you should not really worry at all. And if by any chance you want to monitor your battery and other devices connected to your phone, Samsung just added this brand new battery widget. Now there are 2 different ones you can choose from, and they are very customizable to what you prefer. You can adjust its transparency or make it light mode or dark mode depending on the look you're going for. You can also decide what devices to show and reorder them according to your priorities. Now at the end of the day, I have about 40 to 50% battery left, and I only charge this once a day, and that is when I am going to bed, and this charges from 0 to 100% in about an hour and a half. It's not really the fastest, but it's a tank in terms of its battery life, and my battery anxiety has significantly reduced. Now the second thing I noticed is how very fast and very snappy and fluid the S23 Ultra is. Now out of all the Android phones that I mentioned earlier, including my favorite phone, the Pixel 7 Pro, the S23 Ultra feels miles faster and more fluid. Now everything I do is noticeably better than other phones, and I know it's kind of hypocritical of me to talk about how much faster apps open, because in reality, nobody really cares, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Now side-by-side comparison with say the iPhone 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max, it definitely opens apps a lot faster and more quicker. The animations feel buttery smooth, and I have not experienced any drops in frame rates or even lags for that matter. Now I'd like to add that this S23 Ultra in this lavender color has 12 gigs of RAM with about 512 gigs of internal storage. Now because of the 12 gigs of RAM, app management is at an all-time high, and I can go back to apps I opened days ago and they'll still be there and ready to go. It's pretty wild if I'm being honest. Now even though the design is the same, the processor has been updated to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip made for Galaxy, which is a custom chip. Now although I'm still unsure how this will work with other Android phones, now will Snapdragon make more custom chips for them? Only time will tell. I also feel the new chip is what makes the battery so good with its optimization. Now based on the last 2 weeks, there is a noticeable improvement with multitasking on the S23 Ultra, and basically I just open 2 apps at the same time or have floating notifications open, or I even use the S Pen as a shutter key when taking pictures with my friends. Also, shout out to One UI 5.1, as this update has made my experience a lot better. So it's really an amalgamation of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip and One UI 5.1 that makes the S23 Ultra one of the best performing smartphones right now. I'm also happy they have adopted Snapdragon globally, as opposed to, North America getting one chip while Europe and the rest of the world gets the less than qualified Exynos chipset. Now number 3 is just how great this feels in my hand. Now I have gotten carried away many times and went about my day without using a case, but please do not try this at home. Now the frame is a little bit squared off, and that allows for a better grip when holding the phone. Now compare that to the S22 Ultra from last year, and it was a lot more slippery and honestly was much more uncomfortable to use, especially with one hand. Now it goes to show that a little change in design can go a long way, because right now this is definitely more comfortable than the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Now this might be a hot take, but the 4th thing that I noticed is I absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, unequivocally hate the S Pen, and I see no use for it. Now before you go in the comments and kill me, just hold on for a second. Now I respect what the S Pen is, and I respect its utility, and I appreciate that it has its fans, But just like the S22 Ultra, I don't really see any value in holding a phone on my left hand and using a stylus on the other hand. Despite how powerful the S Pen has become over the last couple of years, I have found it to be a hindrance to my productivity. Now, I have used it maybe 3 or 4 times since my last video, and that was just to show off to my classmates. Now, don't get me wrong, the latency has been dialed down to almost nothing, with new sound effects when you're writing, which is very nice if I'm being honest. You also get a good experience when using air gestures for shortcuts, or translating your handwriting to text, or even using the S Pen as a shutter button when taking pictures, which is a great feature. But all these things that I just mentioned feels very situational. Maybe it's because I'm not an artist or I'm not an architect and I just type faster than I write, or it could be that I'm just very old-fashioned and I prefer using an actual note and a pen to take my notes. Now, there are so many factors, but one that has been constant is the fact that I forget the S Pen even exists and is at my disposal. I only remember it when I'm doing videos or writing scripts for a video, and I whip it out and see if it's pretty decent. Now, I'm all about speed and my efficiency, and the idea of removing the S Pen, selecting my notes, and then writing down is a no for me. Now, I would honestly prefer if they removed the S Pen and gave a bigger battery instead. I mean, it's wishful thinking at this point, but what do you guys think? Comment down below and let me know. Now, the fifth thing I noticed is the camera and its upgrades. Now, I won't really bore you with the specs and sensors, but what you need to know is that 200 megapixel sensor is noticeably sharper and gave so much more detail. Now, when I zoomed in, I loved what I saw, and it had no softness around the edges, which the S22 Ultra suffered from and was much more noticeable. Now, a cool feature that never really gets talked about or advertised is the object eraser. Now, this is pretty similar to the Pixel devices, but this time you can just tap on multiple devices you want erased and poof, just like that, it's all gone. Now, the S23 Ultra is a great phone for taking pictures, and when it comes to its video, it's not so far behind because it got a few upgrades with its night mode recording. This is nice if you're with friends or your family, or you're even at a concert. Now, when it comes to 8K video, it shoots in 30 frames per second, and this is really great and puts it toe to toe with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. All in all, the S23 Ultra is in contender for phone of the year, and it gives you everything you need in a smartphone and more, with a great battery life, a great camera, and of course, great performance. This will be my main phone till further notice. Thank you guys for watching this video, and if you got any value from it, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel, as this helps me go a very long way. If you want to see me compare the S23 Ultra to the iPhone 14 Pro Max in great detail, click right here, and I will see you there where we talk all things tech.